Black Op Radio presents 50 Reasons for 50 Years. Postscript, 1968. Now your host, Len Osanek.
It was an open and shut case. A man was witnessed by many in the pantry firing a gun in the direction of Robert Kennedy. The same man was then tackled, held, and taken into custody. The suspect was an obscure 24-year-old Palestinian refugee named Sirhan Sirhan, who had no previous history of violent behavior and no apparent motive. Sirhan himself had no memory of the incident. Speaking to Black Op Radio, researcher Lisa Pease reviewed some of the contradictory evidence.
It's impossible to say exactly what happened, and we shouldn't have to say exactly what happened to be able to say with clarity what didn't happen. Every single pantry witness, what they told the LAPD, what they told the FBI, not one person saw Sirhan get close enough to shoot Kennedy.
All the witnesses who saw Sirhan clearly put him several feet in front of Robert Kennedy, and yet the medical autopsy evidence shows that Kennedy had to have been killed from not more than an inch behind the right ear. That was the fatal shot. All of the shots that hit Kennedy came from a distance of not more than 4 inches. So Sirhan's a couple of feet away, and the police were very cognizant of this fact because they specifically asked people, where was the gun muzzle? And people placed the gun muzzle 2 to 3 feet from Kennedy. Sirhan was obviously firing a gun. No one disputes that. What people dispute is whether Sirhan was the only one firing a gun. There's always been strong evidence that Sirhan seemed to be in some sort of a disassociated state. He did not look normal to people. One of the witnesses talked about how he had a sickly smile, that he just looked kind of eerily calm. And a lot of other people said that. They said even, while he was being tackled, his eyes were big and wide and enormously peaceful. Sirhan has no physical memory of the shooting. When he confessed to the crime, he did so because everybody told him, well, you were there, you were firing a gun, you had to have killed Kennedy. And he believed them. He had no reason not to believe them, but he honestly didn't remember. There was also a couple people who called the police right after the assassination who said that they knew that Sirhan had been undergoing hypnotic treatment. There's no more details. Their names are not present on this report. There's no follow-up. It's weird. There's stuff that is clearly missing from the LAPD file, stuff that they clearly knew something about. In the 1950s and the 1960s, the CIA was doing mind control programs. It does appear the strongest, best evidence is that Sirhan was really some sort of a victim of some sort of a mind control process.
There was a notebook of schoolwork and notes Sirhan had made, but strewn throughout that were these weird ramblings, repetitive phrases over and over that included things like, please pay to the order of, please pay to the order of, RFK must die, RFK must die. The bulk of the research in this case believed that Sirhan was in a hypnotic state, programmed by somebody else to go to the ambassador and shoot Kennedy. Official stories that Sirhan was making a statement. He was angry at Kennedy for selling planes to Israel that were used to bomb Palestine. He was originally from Palestine and was there at the time of the Israeli-Palestinian War in 1948, where Israel basically came into existence. And Sirhan was a victim then, and he was deeply traumatized in his youth. And trauma and hypnosis go very easily together because the more traumatized you've been, the more you are able to completely tune out and disconnect from reality. So he was highly susceptible. He was tested after the fact for his susceptibility to hypnosis. Obviously, somebody had possibly worked on him. Now, the defense's ultimate argument was that Sirhan had hypnotized himself and that he'd been practicing self-hypnosis. And he may have been practicing self-hypnosis, but it doesn't explain all that happened. Why would he go to the pantry and then self-hypnotize himself? The official explanation doesn't really make any sense. It makes much more sense that somebody else found him, realized he was a highly hypnotizable subject. It does seem obvious that somebody had hypnotic control over Sirhan, that he was sent there to pull focus so that everybody would look at him, they would focus on him, they would capture him, and whoever else was there to actually kill Kennedy was able to get away. And to this day, we really don't know for certain who did it. Sirhan thought he was back at the firing range, and he thought he was shooting at targets.
And according to the official story, earlier that day, Sirhan had been at a shooting range doing target practice and drew a lot of attention because at one point he fired at somebody else's target. One of these things where people would remember him.
How could Sirhan's strange behavior be explained? Well, one place to start would be locating and interviewing two persons who were seen throughout the evening with Sirhan in the Ambassador Hotel, and who were also seen fleeing the hotel after the shooting, calling out that we had just shot Kennedy. The police did not try to locate these people, and instead concentrated their efforts on denying that such persons ever existed. And they weren't the only suspicious people at the scene.
He was seen throughout the night in the company of a girl in a polka dot dress and a guy in a gold sweater.
Sirhan's last memory is the girl having a cup of coffee with him at a small table at the Ambassador Hotel. And she kept asking him, "Do you need some more cream and sugar?" And then she turns and he follows her into the pantry. And then the witnesses in the pantry say that before the shooting, the girl turned to Sirhan and smiled. And that's when Sirhan jumped forward and started shooting.
Sirhan remembers the girl touching him on the back and then suddenly seeing targets. Vincent DiPiero, who was very near them, he'd noticed the girl because she was built. She had a good figure. He said she seemed to be talking to Sirhan, she seemed to be smiling, and he also said she seemed to be holding him. And maybe the bartender was the first point of contact, and then the girl was the one to take him into pantry, put him in position, trigger him, and then leave, because that's her job. She's done. The girl in the polka dot dress is so significant because immediately after the shooting, a girl in a white dress with dark polka dots ran out the back staircase down a fire escape past a Kennedy campaign worker named Sandy Serrano. And the girl was with a young man companion. The girl was in a good mood. She seemed bubbly and happy, like, yay, we did it. And Sandy was very disturbed. And she ended up telling her story on live TV about 2 in the morning.
Down the stairs in the back, came running down the stairs and said, "We've shot him, we've shot him." And I says, "Who did you shoot?" And she says, "We shot Senator Kennedy." She had on a white dress with polka dots. She was light-skinned, dark hair. She had black shoes on, and she has a funny nose.
There were 3 other witnesses to Sandy's conversation. People who saw somebody run past a girl on the steps and heard the girl say, "We shot him," and the girl asked, "Who did you shoot?" Heard she say, "We shot Kennedy." And that, of course, set the press on fire. You have a story of girl in polka dot dress as possible accomplice to Sirhan. So the police worked very hard to put that story away, and they got Sandy under incredible pressure.
They were determined to beat down Sandy Serrano.
You can't say you saw something when you didn't see it. Sandy, look, you know that this is wrong. You may want to be pushing it off with a smirk on your face, with a smile, but you know that deep inside what you aren't telling.
I've never seen a girl.
No. Saying a person tell you we have shot Kennedy, and that's wrong.
I think it's questionable whether or not she actually reneged on the story, but there's no doubt that by the end, she's very much weakened. Hernandez and Pena get the word out to the DA that Sandy Serrano has retracted her story. The DA goes on TV, smilingly says that Sandy Serrano has retracted her story. For that time period, the whole girl in the polka dot dress story went away.
A second suspect who was arrested at the hotel, Michael Wayne. A guy was running from the room right after the shots, and several people just in their mind, they had the impression, for whatever reason, that he was carrying a gun in a rolled-up poster. And they ran after him. They tried to tackle him. He was apprehended by another Ace security guard and taken out a back door. Of course, in the end, everybody said nothing happened. It wasn't him. I found so many files now, so many witnesses earlier in the night before the shots went down, and he is lying all over the place. He's pretending to know people he doesn't know. He's doing whatever he can to get press passes, and yet when he's arrested after the fact, he's not wearing the press passes he worked so hard to get. What's that about?
Michael Wayne was at the Ambassador that night. He starts asking the custodial help, where's Senator Kennedy going to be speaking after? Do you have his itinerary? He then goes up to Bobby Kennedy's suite. And his excuse is he wanted a poster-sized picture of Bobby Kennedy. Signed.
It's not impossible that Wayne was not necessarily a shooter, but taking the gun out of there, on somebody else's behalf, handing it off to somebody who would then disappear it from the scene quickly. Stage deception. There's a distraction here so you don't see what's going on there. And that's exactly what the crime scene in the pantry started to look like.
When you put all these things together, it paints a real picture of an intelligence operation. And the fact that none of the bullets could ever be matched to the gun indicates that perhaps Sirhan wasn't firing bullets. Perhaps Sirhan was firing blanks. If he truly is in a hypnotic state, he may not be that great a shot. What if somebody gives him a trigger word and he turns and points the gun in the wrong direction? If I were the CIA and I had somebody set up, I wouldn't rely on a hypno-programmed assassin. I'd get a real professional hitman in there. And I would have used Sirhan as the distractor, pull focus, step forward, fire a gun, make a big noise.
Stay tuned for the next installment. Postscript 1968.